When I reviewed Centipede a few weeks ago, I was convinced that Atari was actually onto something with their new Recharged series. It had a stylish presentation that honored the spirit of the original while simultaneously adding enough new to make it feel fresh and modern, leaving me impressed and excited for more. Now we get Black Widow, a remake of the 1982 action game that helped to lay the groundwork for the dual-stick shooters that we love today. And while it may not be as well known as Centipede, this updated shoot-'em-up is yet another quality game making a case for the Recharged brand. But is this Black Widow actually better than the movie starring Scarlett Johansson? Well, that's just one of the questions that we won't be answering in this video game review. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't all that familiar with Black Widow before this game. Aside from checking it out for a few minutes in the Atari Anthology release on the original Xbox, I don't have a lot of hands-on experience with it. But like so many classic arcade titles from that era, all you really need to do is play Black Widow for just a few seconds to know why people loved it. It was extremely fast-paced for the time, it had a cool concept, and it was one of the pioneers of the dual-stick shoot-'em-up subgenre. I mean, if this was at my local arcade when I was growing up, I would have played the hell out of it. You take control of a spider who briskly moves across an oval web, shooting at all the insects and baddies that are trying to invade your home. As I'm sure you've already figured out, all these different bugs act and attack in different ways. Some will swarm, some will shoot, some will blow up, and most importantly, some will drop off eggs. This is where the game takes a sharp turn from the typical shoot-'em-up tropes, because our spider hero is able to grab onto the eggs and either toss them off the side or yeet them right through the center of the webbing. But watch out, because if you wait too long, those eggs will hatch and you definitely don't want to know what's inside. Like most shoot-'em-ups, a lot of the fun comes from picking up the power-ups. We get a lot of the usual suspects here, including a spread shot, explosive rounds, a helpful shield, and even a shot that shoots both in front of you and on each side. I was happy to see some of the powers from Centipede also make a cameo here, such as a slow motion item and ghosts that'll show up and scare all your enemies away. Speaking of Centipede, this recharged version of Black Widow uses almost the exact same modes and interface. We're given a choice between the standard arcade mode, where you'll keep playing until you die, as well as a more comprehensive challenge mode built for both solo and co-op fun. These 30 challenge stages is where the real meat of this game is, and much like Centipede, it's really the main reason to buy Black Widow. Some of the stages will have you trying to stay alive until the time runs out, while others are more about shooting the right kind of bugs. Some of the most fun tasks involve tossing as many eggs off the side of the web as possible, since that's one of the few mechanics in Black Widow that you don't see in other shooters. The problem is that all this is far too familiar. At first, I was excited to dive into the challenges since I already loved this kind of shoot-'em-up. But what I found were challenges that didn't seem as original or fresh as those in Centipede. There's a lot of repetition in the style of tasks that you take on, something that makes the mode feel a little generic. The last Recharged game I played had all kinds of creative challenges that not only played with the level designs, but also with the way you actually played Centipede. It forced you to look at the classic game in a whole new way, something that doesn't happen in Black Widow. But look, as much as I would like to blame the repeating challenges, that's not the real problem. The issue is that Black Widow is ultimately undermined by the subgenre. We've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of similar dual-stick shooters in the last 15 years, with many of them doing all the same things that we see in this recharged port. That wasn't the case with Centipede. Sure, overhead shooters still exist, but almost none of them play like Centipede. By upgrading that game, Atari reminded us why the arcade original was so much fun. That's just not the dynamic at play in Black Widow. And frankly, there are a lot of other dual-stick shooters that do this kind of thing a lot better. I also need to point out that the arcade mode is terrible, which seems to be a trend with these recharged games. Aside from giving you the option to play with a friend, there's not much to the standard arcade mode. Like I said, you play it until you die. That's it. You don't even have multiple lives or continues, you simply die and start over from scratch. That's exactly how it was in Centipede, too. If Atari is going to continue to make this series, then I hope they would start putting a little bit more time into this mode. All it takes is a few extra options and a way to tinker with the rules. I don't know, maybe there's a time limit or a way you can only play with a certain type of gun. At the very least, give us a couple of lives to work with and maybe a way to earn more. That's standard stuff in arcade games, including the 1982 arcade classic this game is based on. Visually, Black Widow Recharged looks great. I like the throwback look and how the simple graphics evoke the spirit of the old school vector games. That said, I do wish the levels had more variety to them, or really any variety at all. The colors change slightly if you play the arcade mode long enough, but that isn't enough. I also wasn't a huge fan of the soundtrack. To be fair, the music itself is fine, but there's this obnoxious buzzing sound in the background that just ruins every song that they throw at you. Thankfully, the gameplay is more fun than the buzzing, but you've definitely seen and done all this before. Black Widow is a solid entry in the Recharged series, but nowhere near as exciting as the recent Centipede update. While the dual-stick shooting is fun and the concept is cool, the challenge levels are too repetitive and the action will remind you of dozens of better shooters on the market. If you can get beyond the limited modes and the obnoxious buzzing in the background, you'll find a stylish shooter that does a solid job bringing the 1982 dual-stick pioneer into the 21st century. Black Widow Recharged is fun, but not essential. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What Atari game should they recharge next? I mean, I feel like they're just gonna get through everything eventually, right? Especially if these games keep selling. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with not one, but 2 horror-themed Game Over episodes. Longtime fans of the series, well, they already know what one of them's gonna be. While you wait for that, do me a favor and click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,